And it was a social media post that told me, look, if you think you're going to go down the path of public pressure, you found the wrong guy. I respond to flexes, whether it's somebody in an airport coming after me or the President of the United States, the same way.
Yeah, Thom Tillis, afraid of death threats. Then get the out of office.
Look, if you want to threaten me, you better bring it.
Welcome on into another Tying It Together with Tim Boyum. I am Tim Boyum. We got a great show for you this week, folks. We have the one and only U.S. Senator Thom Tillis on the program. Now, there were all kinds of requests for interviews with him after his disagreement with President Trump this summer, just before the 4th of July, over the big, beautiful bill, and then him announcing the next day that he was going to retire and not run for re-election in 2026, setting up an open seat in North Carolina, the probably most highly contested seat in the country next year. But I wanted to give a little room for him to breathe, to think about this for a while before I sat down with him. And I also wanted to talk with him in North Carolina. So we went back to Cornelius, where his political career started. And we walked along a mountain bike trail where that trail really started his political career. A little later, we sit down by Lake Norman on a picnic bench at the same park and talk, of course, about everything going on and his reasoning and thoughts and his conversations with President Trump. It's an incredible conversation. But I wanted to get you kind of in the frame of mind of who Thom Tillis is, what makes him tick, and what he thinks about all these calls about him flip-flopping and not being a true conservative Republican. So here it is, the beginning of Thom Tillis' career in Cornelius.
So tell me where we are first.
This is about 20 acres of wood across the street from Jeton Park and Cornelius, where I used to play hide and seek with my dog. And there used to be a dump right over here that they ended up having to clean up. But I decided this would just be a great place for kind of an entry-level single-track mountain bike trail. Because at that point, I'd been riding for a couple of years after I moved to North Carolina. And I'm always looking for reasons to get people out in the woods. So this is where it started. It's a great piece of land, and you'll see it in a minute.
And so you, this place launched your political career, right?
Yeah, I did, because when I first had to find out who owned it, I didn't know if it was a future development, and I found out that Mecklenburg County owned it, and the town of Cornelius was managing it, sort of like they did with Jeton. And the first time that I proposed the idea, you would have thought I was creating a blight on the town. But then I decided to do a typical management consultant presentation and proposed a single-track, environmentally sustainable mountain bike trail, all done by volunteers without taxpayer expense. And that was a proposal probably in 2000, late 1999, 2000. 7 years later, it got done. And by that time, I'd been on the Park and Rec Advisory Board because they invited me to after I proposed this trail. Town council, beat John Rhodes in a primary, legislature, speaker, Senate. But it was about the time that I became speaker. It was at 2007. It was a little bit longer than that when the trail actually got built.
In some ways, rocking on this now has to feel good, right? Because this is like, I mean, you try to get a lot of things done in the Senate. This is something concrete you get done and still see.
That's right. Actually, the only thing better than walking on it is riding on it. So we'll have to get you back on a bike sometime. It's fun. It's an entry-level trail with a few little obstacles. You'll see some track down here that get people out in the woods. And what was particularly good is to see how more people got out during COVID. If there was anything good, there were a few good things coming out of COVID. One is more people got back out in the woods.
Yeah. Could you ever imagine that this trail would lead you A, to politics, and B, now the Senate?
No, it was it was interesting because, I go to the Park and Rec Advisory Board. I had a very detailed proposal, being a management consultant, PowerPoint, everything else, obligatory. And they were impressed with it. So it was the chair of Park and Rec Advisory Board that said, well, great proposal. Maybe if you come on the board, it'll help you get it done. It didn't help me get it done. It ended up taking years to get it done. In fact, the Tar Heel Trailblazers are the ones who ultimately carried the mantle and got the approval and did all the clearing and all this sort of stuff to make the mountain bike trail fun.
So if you've always largely been a Republican?
I've been a Republican since before I could register to vote. Yeah, back in Tennessee. When I turned 18, I registered to vote in Tennessee. I've voted Republican ever since.
So you're a fascinating case to me about how people perceive you in the political world. Because Democrats will call you a right-winger. And some people in your own party will call you a rhino.
Yeah.
I think a large majority of people call you moderate. How do you describe how you became who you are politically?
I think it's what's really interesting is just how uninformed all of those decisions are. Okay, so take a look at my time in the legislature. Multiple pro-Second Amendment bills, expanded concealed carry, et cetera, done on an incremental basis, but in totality significant. Tax cuts, reg reform, multiple pro-life bills done incrementally. If you were to take a look at, I could almost see why some Democrats would say I'm a fire-breathing conservative, because if you look at tax cut, annexation reform, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, limited government, restrained spending, yeah, I guess I could look like a crazy conservative. But in the first 7 months that I'm in the legislature, I helped lead the negotiation on a compromise for a renewable portfolio standard, because the Democrats were about to pass the California renewable portfolio standard, which would have been devastating to the state. So we ended up coming up with a compromise. So that's where I guess maybe some Republicans would call me a rhino or liberal. But what those Republicans are not telling you, if we had not done that, we would have had a devastating renewable portfolio standard in North Carolina, like California, that would have destroyed us. And if we hadn't compromised, that would have happened. And we dodged that bullet in 2007. So when people ask me, you know, what's changed, I said, not a damn thing, except maybe you are paying a little bit more attention to the work that I've done over the last 20 years.
Is in a lot of ways the root of your politics, your background though, also as a business management consultant? You want to get things done, and sometimes you have to take a little something you may not like to get that done?
Well, it is. I think it is. I think a lot of it's just training and methodologies and execution. You know, you have all these people, you know, most home run hitters through the ages in baseball, the greatest home run hitters also have some of the biggest strikeout averages in history. And I think we got a lot of home run hitter wannabes, but people that don't even get on base politically or legislatively. They're just not getting work done. And I know they're kind of playing to the camera, and they're playing to the social media model today, and they're exploiting populism that we're in right now. But the reality is, all of those people have one thing in common who consistently judge me on being a conservative or not. They don't get anything done. So all they are talking heads that happen to get elected, and I don't have much patience for those kind of people. So when I go about trying to get things done, I make that abundantly clear to them. Why on earth would I work with people that can't demonstrate they know how to legislate? You go to the ones who can.
So would you define yourself as a, and I know I talked to Pat McCrory about this. He can't stand labels, which is why he's with No Labels, I guess. But, would you?
It's the name of a group, by the way. It's kind of funny.
Would you define yourself then as a conservative Republican? Is that how you would label yourself?
Like I said, you know, anybody that wants to go toe-to-toe with me on conservative outcomes, name the place, name the venue, invite whatever news outlets you want to, and we'll have a great quality discussion. Yeah, there's people like Mark Robinson. Mark Robinson says he's a true conservative. Mark Robinson has 0 legislative accomplishments in his career. How can, if that's what a true conservative is, I don't want to be a true conservative. I want to be somebody who makes promises, fulfills promises, accepts something short of perfect if it moves the ball down the field, or if it moves the football down the field.
So, some people call it flip-flopping. I know you've heard all this stuff about issues
Give me an
like
example.
Gay marriage, for instance.
Yeah.
And I know I was there on the floor of the House and interviewed you, and you predicted that it would change. But, and I mean, all kinds of things. So I could probably list off a few of them. But what? To me, it seems like an evolution Explain how you change on these
I'm
things.
tired of lazy critics. I really am. They bore me. They've always bored me. And now my patience with them is running thin, because I'm going to try and leave as a legacy speaking truth to people who deserve to be outed. Okay, so take respect for marriage. I was just talking about this the other day. We were at a position where the Supreme Court has ruled in Obergefell, right? Now, what respect for marriage, I saw an opportunity there to say, if states want to ban gay marriage in the future and the Supreme Court ruling gets overturned, then can't we at least provide certainty to couples who are in states that allow gay marriage or civil unions to have that contract honored no matter where they go in the United States? That's all we did, full faith and credit. We didn't legalize it, we didn't codify it, but you know what we got in exchange for that, which people are increasingly paying attention to? Some of the most expansive religious liberty protections that's ever been put into statute. It's already been used to defend religious institutions in federal district courts. In fact, one case cited the reference to that language as a basis for dismissing a case that was about to go to discovery. And so are you telling me, just providing certainty to couples who are married and in a union, that if in the future, if the posture changes, that they can have certainty that those contracts will be honored no matter where they go in the United States, is a bad thing? That's one example. And that's why we had the Church of Latter-day Saints and others endorse the bill, because they got how important that religious liberty language was in statute. And quite honestly, I'm surprised that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle accepted it.
Do you think some of this is it's either you're with us or against us kind of error?
Yeah, I'm not into binary decisions in politics. That's inherently undemocratic. But that is how they work. You're either with us or you're against us. Well, some of the most enduring and most profound policy that's ever been implemented by the U.S. Congress has been a result of an intensive, difficult, bipartisan process. That's what makes this country different from all others.
I mean, I remember the first couple of years, everything seemed pretty normal and whatnot. Trump comes in 2017.
Yeah.
Did you notice things changed right away for you? And I don't mean because of him necessarily, just the era and...
No, well, what happened when President Trump came in is the populism began in 2007 when Obama was on the trail and we were seeing a different way of attaching and securing voters. President Trump came in and, like he is very good at doing, is put that on steroids. And also, to be fair, social media really has exploded in terms of, if you look back in, 2014, 15 timeframe, just take a look about how differently we get our news now and how people are mobilized. So President Trump happened to come in while that transformation's happening, and now every single decision, even some of the most routine in the past, are under a microscope, because you've always got some talking head or pundit out there who's a drive-by intellectual that spends very little time doing the work. What they do is spend time on, how can I convey this message for maximum clicks and monetization of my word? That's what they're all about. I mean, these are not patriots. These are people that are making a living and selling, whatever else they can sell in the meantime with their ads.
When did you notice something change, though, that kind of, whether it was how people viewed you or challenges that you came across because of this new era? When did you feel that?
I think the people that knew me realized I didn't change at all. I've disagreed with Democrats more consistently because we're ideologically unaligned, and I disagree with Republicans when I think what they're doing is a bad idea. I'll give you a good example. So some people could say maybe I started pushing back on people like the members of the Freedom Caucus when I got up here in the Senate. The fact of the matter is, I had my scheduler, my assistant, go to Pier 1 Imports back in 2011 after I became Speaker to buy a few dozen little glass pigs with wings on them And I had them in my office so that anytime a Republican member would come in and want to move something that I thought was just completely off strategy, I'd give them that pig. I only had to give out about 7 or 8 of them. I gave them that pig with wings, and I said, it's off strategy, but if you could teach this pig that already has wings how to fly back into my office, we'll put it on the agenda. And so I've been fighting dumb for a long time. It's just become, to me, dumb is anything that disadvantages Republicans' chances to govern. That's what dumb is to me. You go as far as you can in terms of a conservative agenda that the people who are voting for you can absorb, understand, and support. One of the reasons why we run into problems in the legislature is instead of taking things in bites and being prepared to take the criticism from the right, saying you're not going far enough, is how you ultimately get all that you want to get accomplished done. But you do it in a way that doesn't create a political lightning rod that's difficult to get your members back. You know, if you're Speaker of the House or you're the head of the Senate, your number one job should be making sure that you leave that chamber at or above the level you found it in terms of the majority. And your decision making has to be driven by that. And if you're in a state like North Carolina, which is a purple state, I would argue on any given issue, just left or right of center, leaders that get that can stay in power for a long time, and parties can, and the ones that don't will get kicked out.
All right, so that was the mountain bike trail, and we walked for probably about a mile. And I was watching my watch, checking the steps and the count there. And as you saw there, my photographer, he walked backwards the entire time. So I said, it's probably time to sit down and have a conversation. This is going to be the part where many of you really are listening to this for, because I'm going to dig deep about the conversations that he had with President Trump, when he started thinking about he may or may not run, and what was that like, what he told his family, some death threats that he's gotten over the years, and also what we start with here, that censure backed by his own party in 2023. Here it is, the rest of our conversation.
You mentioned we were walking, the censure.
Yeah.
What do you think about the censure now?
I think it'll stand the test of time. I mean, the fact of the matter is we were successful in getting the most expansive religious liberty protections in law and U.S. statutes in the history of this country, and I stand by that. That's why church organizations did endorse the bill. Church of Latter-day Saints, who do not sanction same-sex marriage, understood that all we were doing was providing certainty to couples who enter into civil unions, and knowing that that contract would be honored in any state. And in exchange for that certainty, we got religious liberty protections that are critically needed because religious institutions are under constant attack.
But as a senator and someone that believes he's a conservative Republican, did it irritate you?
No, not really.
No?
No, it's sort of to me, if you're either doing it for the right reasons and you stand by those reasons, or you don't. And I don't have time to concern myself with people who aren't doing their homework and are taking cheap shots for political purposes more than anything else. They're a waste of my time.
Some of them have said you abandoned the party. Do you feel like you've been abandoned by your party?
No, I think the party, look, Republican principles are what they are. And then if anybody on any given day wants to sit down with me and determine whose behavior is more consistent with the founding principles of a Reagan Republican, I'm feeling pretty good about my chances on any day.
All right, can you take us behind the scenes of your thought process, at least over the last 9 months in particular, about whether or not you were going to run? I've heard, you hired campaign staff earlier this year, you were raising money, but I heard through the grapevine that you were still sort of, I don't know whether waffling's the right term or not. Where was your frame of mind the last 9 months over
I
this?
called it confirmatory due diligence. I made it clear to my donors, my supporters, my staff, that I didn't take going into a $600 million business transaction lightly. That's roughly what they expect the Senate race to be in North Carolina. So I had to be sure that I could raise the money. I had to be sure that the Republican organizations would be behind me and contribute. You know, if it's going to be $600 million, then you can pretty much assume $350 million of it would be for the Democrat and liberal interest. About 250 million would be Republican. I needed to raise about 50 million, so I had to convince myself that the financial foundation was there. That was one piece. The other piece was the political foundation. Were we going to transition into a governing unit up in D.C. under President Trump's leadership? Were we going to pursue issue sets that I thought were consistent with the sort of profile we need to win in a purple state like North Carolina? And all those factors were going into my decision-making process. And I'd told some people it would probably be in the September timeframe, but I felt compelled to think in terms of what happens if I don't run. What risk does it create for our Senate seat? And that's a very heavy burden. And that was probably forcing me to try and get to yes, but I was only going to get to yes if all of these other things lined up properly. And then we had H.R. 1 come before us, and I had a disagreement with the president, and I felt like that disagreement was going to create a lot of uncertainty in the governing foundation question of my confirmatory due diligence. So I thought that at that point in time, I should just tell the president, if he felt like this policy was his priority, and he felt like this policy could win the day in North Carolina nationally, then he needed to find somebody who could sell that policy, because I couldn't.
Meaning if you ran, Medicaid expansion went away, that would be an issue, a liability for you in the campaign, particularly against Roy Cooper?
Well, I think it's a number of factors. Look, I did this independent estimates. There's nobody, including the White House, have ever pointed to a fallacy in our estimates. They haven't pointed to an assumption being wrong. And so I stand by that. And having been speaker in a fiscal crisis, I know what it's like to come up with a $2 billion shortfall. You know why? Because I came up with a $2 billion shortfall in the first 6 months of me being speaker. And it was not easy. We fixed it. And most people didn't think we would, as a bunch of rookies, governing for the first time in majorities in the House and Senate, but we fixed it. So I have to say that unique experience told me that $2 billion or $2.6 billion a year for 10 years was a big challenge to surmount. Now I'm trying to work on doing the best we can to help the legislature and help the Congress navigate through that.
People point to the WAPO op-ed that you did about the emergency declaration and then voting for it, but there was that spat with the president, although it wasn't public, and then of course the Hague-South vote, the back and forth on that, and then the last vote. Was it clarity you needed basically about being able to run who you need to be?
No, because the one thing that I think my staff will tell you is I'm going to be who I am, period. I don't ever get into who I need to be posture, because that's inauthentic, and that's what's wrong with Washington and state capitals. I'm going to be who I am. And if that product isn't what people want to buy, then they need to buy something else. So, no, it was more a matter of how do you negotiate the political landscape when you're going to be at odds with this impending health care policy that I believe is very, very threatening to Republicans. And it's what concerns me the most, it's almost a mirror image to what I observed in 2009 when Obama was trying to sell the Affordable Care Act, long before it was ever passed. We became a majority, and I became the second Republican speaker since the Civil War, because the party that controlled Washington in 2009 and 2010 made a bad health care decision. Not so much the what. Maybe we did need to expand health care coverage and do all that, but the how was awful. I feel the same way about H.R. 1. I don't mind the what. I mean, what people are trying to do are conveniently forgetting that I was for the House proposal of the health care for Medicaid, $800 billion savings, work requirements, volunteering, all of those things that they're selling today, I was for. I'm not for the additional $200 billion that have created the economic burden that I think states are going to have a very difficult time managing.
It's weird. We're sitting here at the lake, so it's weird to ask you a question like this in some ways, but what is it like being at the center of this and talking to the President of the United States? What are those conversations like?
Well,
as much as you can say.
I think it's interesting. It is amazing to, and I'm no different than probably at least 70 or 80 of the senators. It reminds me, sorry, I'm going to turn that off. Most of these people are natural people doing the same thing when they have the luxury of being home. There are a few that probably carry the same persona that they have in D.C. all the way up until they're with their immediate family, and then hopefully they're normal people then. But D.C. has a way of changing a lot of people, but most of the people when they get back home are doing the same things.
What were those conversations?
Maybe not in the woods as much as me, maybe not doing all the other crazy things I do, but at least getting out of the park.
What, as much as you can tell me though, what are those conversations, what were they like with the president?
Even that last, well, I've had a conversation subsequent to that, but the conversation when I told the president that it was time to find my replacement, because I was not going to change my posture. It would mean that I'd have to take a public position that was absolutely counter to everything that I knew on the healthcare policy. They've all been pleasant conversations. I mean, he may drop an F-bomb, I may drop an F-bomb. That's because we use that language, in discussion with colleagues or others maybe. But we've never really had a cross discussion in that way. And frankly, it was the first time that I've ever had a discussion that prompted a social media post. And it was a social media post that told me, look, if you think you're going to go down the path of public pressure, you found the wrong guy. I respond to flexes, whether it's somebody in an airport coming after me or the President of the United States, the same way. If I have a principled basis for my position, you're not going to change it. I don't care who you are.
So that social media post, was that kind of that moment that you knew?
Yeah, it was about 10 minutes later. I said, now would be a good time to find my replacement. And about 10 minutes after that, he said he'd be seeking interviewees for the role. A lot of people think I decided to resign after he posted that. I actually told the president it was time for him to get started. So I was glad that he posted immediately. He needed to get a replacement soon because Michael Whatley, who's the presumptive nominee, needs every ounce or every second of daylight to be best positioned to win next year, and I hope he wins.
You must have had a moment of clarity though. You didn't call your wife apparently.
No, I'm bad at that. It's the same thing when I quit my job to go full time in the legislature. I told my wife that evening. So. Note to self: don't do that anymore.
But you clearly had some clarity there. I mean,
I did.
No hesitation.
I did, but again, I'm so methodology focused. So this was just another encounter and confirmatory due diligence that started after I knew who won the election last year. So it wasn't an emotional decision. I did after my chief of staff and I were on the phone. I've never actually read the entire Truth Social post. My chief was on the phone because he knew I'd talked with the president, just checking in with me, and then the post came through and he read the first line that said I was grandstanding or something. That's all I know about that post. And hung up the phone, texted my staff. I said, I'm going to sleep on it, but I think I'll probably announce my plan to retire after this term tomorrow. I didn't sleep on it. I thought about it for about 10 minutes, and then I told the president it was time for him to find a replacement, and then I started working with my staff to roll it out the following day.
Do you think, so how did you wake up the next morning then after sleeping?
I slept like a baby. Actually, it was funny. I had a doctor friend of mine the next day say, I hope you're doing okay. I took a snapshot of my night statistics. My at-rest heart rate was 37. And I think the peak was 67. So that's not bad for somebody who just told the President of the United States no.
How about, I mean, you guys have been together for a long time. I mean, sitting with the guy next to us here that's been a long time.
Yeah.
How did that all go?
Well, I think they're kind of used to working with me at this point. I mean, people like Adam's been around for a while. I scared the heck out of them. Off the record, I'll tell you a funny story during a campaign last cycle. But, I love my staff, and I spent a lot of time trying to help them with their career development. And so I think they knew it was time, and they couldn't have been surprised because I had been telling them for months, we're doing confirmatory due diligence, guys. I know that's geeky management consultant methodology stuff, but it's meaningful. It means that I've been tracking month to month. What does that environment look like in November of 2027? What does it look like? And or how are we best prepared for it? And our 2026. So I think sometimes it probably drives them crazy, but I'm just a methods and practices person that a lot of my staff are really warming up to now. It's what I learned at PricewaterhouseCoopers, IBM. So it just made complete sense for me to do it in that moment.
Because it'll look impulsive to some people, but you've been working toward that decision.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'd say. There are literally hundreds of people who have heard the term. You use terms that people will remember. There are hundreds of people who have heard me say confirmatory due diligence since the early part of this year. Because I also wanted to be honest with the donors and others that while I was moving and doing everything I needed to do to be prepared to win a third reelection, I'm constantly looking at the risk profile and the other factors that would lead up to a successful outcome. And so that, I think people can't say it was a surprise, and they can't say, I had a lot of people say, do you really have to talk about this confirmatory due diligence at every fundraiser you go to? I said, yes, because I want to be honest with everyone. I want to tell them that I'm in it. But the reason I believe I won the first race against all odds, everybody said there was no way I could beat the legislator in North Carolina and beat him. I mean, he was the Civitas Legislator of the Year. The reason I beat him is we did the homework and we saw a path. The reason I became Speaker is because I saw a path to get the caucus behind me, and I did the homework to do it. The reason I ran for the Senate is because I was convinced if we executed a good campaign, we could take out a Democrat-Republican incumbent. Every single time, though, I was convinced we were going to win. At the point in time, I finally made the decision to file. And it's because I do that work, and I set that aside, and I remind myself of all the factors that led me to making that decision to run, and I stay focused on that to produce the result, which is winning an election in this case. But it's no different than every project I ever did for clients. Plan it out, scope it, execute, move on.
Do you think you could have won in 2026?
I have no doubt we would have won if we ran in 2026. The question is what maybe we would have had to have done that would have been at odds with the Republican Congress and legislature to win the race. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking it through, but there are some instances where I would have obviously a policy that I was so outspoken against in H.R. 1, I would have had to have run against. And that would have been at odds with my Republican colleagues running in Congress who are going to try and run on it. So that just created complexity that I didn't want to be a party to. I'm a party builder. I helped turn around a conference that was in shambles in the state legislature. After I won my first election, I came in here and thought, oh my God, what have I done? I mean, our conference was not meeting. Our caucus, you remember, you were covering, our conference didn't meet. Maybe a third of the conference members would show up to a caucus meeting. And then started working on how do you actually build consensus around the things we agree on. You were using the minority of things we disagree on as a reason for not showing up at conference. How do you flip that script? How do you build a party? How do you build a state party that actually believes we can win statewide races? How do you build on that? I'm that kind of a person. I couldn't find myself in a position where I'd literally have to be running on a different message in congressional districts in North Carolina next year. That made no sense to me.
Let's talk about threats for a little bit. Have you listened to the voicemails that come in?
Yeah, actually some of them were so compelling I had them put in prison too, and working on a third one.
Yeah, Thom Tillis, afraid of death threats. Then get the out of office.
I would like to talk to Thom Tillis and ask him why he thinks it's okay for him to take money from this nation and it over. Why does he think that he can tell his employers to go themselves every goddamn day, all day long, and sell his goddamn nation out and his employers over. Don't he know that his employers can take a axe handle and cave his head in? And his kids' head and his goddamn grandkids' head. This piece of
Look, if you want to threaten me, you better bring it. And if we can track you down and we can have you arrested and we can put you in prison, I will show up in the courtroom if that's what's necessary to put somebody behind bars who would do that, threaten me or my family. And God forbid you come into my presence and do that.
Has it been hard? I mean, you're not the only one to face threats, obviously.
Yeah, all the time. It's very common and it's wrong. And you can't come up with some sort of a righteous threat. You're either against these sort of threats as a way to affect public discourse or you're not, which is why I feel so strongly about January the 6th. I mean, it was a massive threat to democracy. And I made it very clear that anybody that thinks anything about January 6th was justified never get confirmed in any committee I'm in for this Congress. And feel the same way. You know, I feel like if you threaten Elizabeth Warren or some of the most liberal people, you're every bit as bad as if you threaten Thom Tillis or Ted Cruz.
What about when you go to events and stuff like that? Do you remember ones in person where you've had to deal with stuff?
Deal with like people getting in my face? Yeah, poor dude at DCA airport about 3 months ago.
What happened?
He made the mistake of thinking that he could be disrespectful to me and expect me to say, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. I tore him up. And I hope he watches this interview and remembers what I did, because I don't take that. I mirror people's behavior. I know it's at odds with the idea of the golden rule, but this is the way I've worked consistently for the 20 years that I've been in public service. If you come up to me and you say, look, I really disagree with your vote on fill in the blanks. Can you give me some idea why you went that way? We're going to have a long conversation and it'll end when you choose to end it, because you're genuinely interested. You got curiosity. You get up in my face and say I'm some sort of a hack rhino that voted against or that prevented Ed Martin from being confirmed, which was the subject matter in DCA airport, and you raise your voice at me or you get an aggressive posture, you're going to get it right back. Just ask that guy at DCA. He lives here in Charlotte. Ask that guy in DCA how I take that kind of crap. It's the only way that what's happened, I think, in social media is that it's like the lines are blurred. I think people are now trying to use, for elected, I'll speak just for elected officials, the same sort of language and their vitriol in social media. They think from time to time they can get away with it in person. And probably for 99 other U.S. senators, they may be able to, but not this senator.
Does it wear at all? I mean, you got grandkids, your wife's at home. Does it wear on you or does it wear on them?
I think it wears more on them. I mean, the only thing I got out of that encounter at DCA was fun watching that guy's face when he didn't know what to do. And so for me, it was, I was fine with it. My family, all of them, you can tell that criticism of me affects them, but I tell guys, I'm here with my babies. I'm here with my family. That conversation, that part of my life is so far away and compartmentalized. You should never worry about it. Never worry about me.
When you did that interview with Jake Tapper, you talked about, first of all, in your statement, you said you look forward to calling balls and strikes. In the Jake Tapper interview on CNN, you mentioned about calling out people in the White House at some point.
Yeah.
Do you want to start today or no?
No, because again, see, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to burn the house down. That's not how I operate. I build. I'm a party builder. I've done it. I helped do it here in North Carolina. I agree with the vast majority of what President Trump wants to do. It's very seldom the what. There's a few cases where I disagree, like H.R. 1. It's the how. And the president, and I've told the president this, you have amateurs advising you who may be smart, successful people, but they have no legislative experience and they have very little execution experience. You can actually be a billionaire and never having completed your first end-to-end life cycle complex project. I have. And all I was trying to, so I tried to advise the president. He's got folks that are riding his wave because he's the wave right now. They have no interest in his legacy long term. All they're looking for is being positioned for the next wave. And I know who they are. And over time, I hope that I can expose it quietly and confidentially to the administration so that they move on and this president can have a good legacy. The last communication I sent to the president, it's not verbatim, but pretty close. I said, if I accomplish nothing else over the next 18 months, I hope I can prove to you that you have people in the White House who are advising you who couldn't care less about your legacy, and I do.
Did he respond?
No, I didn't expect them to. But it was important for me to let them know that, look, it's not about Donald J. Trump. It's about the fact that he's a Republican president. And I have a responsibility as a U.S. Senator to make every president successful. But I have an especially weightier burden to make every Republican president more successful. Why on earth would anybody with their right mind think that I, as a Republican, could find any value and trying to undermine the President of the United States to push a legitimately conservative agenda forward? Why would that make sense on any level? What can I possibly gain from that? So if I'm actually willing to take the step to tell the President, you need to look around this corner because your staff aren't for you, they probably ought to take a look at it.
I think a lot of people think you're going to go to K Street and lobby, make millions of dollars after you get a Senate. Have you thought about life after the U.S. Senate yet?
You got plenty of time to do that, but I'm not going to be a lobbyist. I'll maintain a relationship with the members that I like in D.C., and maybe I'll help, things like immigration reform and other things that I'd really like to get to a good place. I'm going to work on those sort of things to kind of scratch the itch, but I've still got more business experience than I do political experience in terms of years of experience. I want to go back to doing real work.
And mountain biking. I met Cal, by the way, at Big Ed's. Cal Cunningham.
Did you?
Yeah. You guys
That's the first place we had breakfast 6 weeks after the election.
That's why we met.
Well, see, it was really funny because Cal, the way this all started was Cal and I, we were at WRAL, we were about to do a debate. It's the first time we'd ever been in the same room together. He's in the the waiting room. We come in, and Cal's being his typical bubbly self, and we're walking. It was funny. It was like the Foghorn Leghorn cartoon. We're like walking in, and we're talking. He said, after this all over, win or lose, we ought to break bread sometime. I said, I think that's a great idea, Cal. And then we walk in, and so we're having this wonderful conversation. We walk in, it's like, that man is the devil. That's our opening statements back and forth. And then we went back, and then like Foghorn Leghorn, if we got out, well, we'll see you, Cal. We walked out. That was literally our first interaction with each other. And so after I won, I called him up and said, hey, we were talking about breaking bread, why don't we do it? So we went to Big Ed's. And when we sat there, we had this waitress. She kept on looking at us. She came back and forth. She finally said, are you Thom Tillis and Cal Cunningham? I said, yeah. She said, I'm texting with my husband. He said he doesn't believe it. There's no way y'all be sitting together. Can I take a picture with y'all? Yeah, and we've maintained contact since then.
The reason I ask about this is I know both of you pretty well. You seem like you're two people that if you were both senators, you could work together.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, we definitely would have found a way to work together. Unfortunately, that outcome was mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
And I won, Cal.
but it is, and I know he's talked about, not to rub it in or anything, right?
Yeah, not to rub it in. I mean, it's objectively true.
But he's talked about how you guys are trying to bring back civility by getting along. Do you see a path toward that anytime in the near future?
Yeah, I do. I still think that we're going through a populist era, like I said earlier, and that things will right itself over time. But it comes. I think I get a surprise just yesterday. I was in a meeting, and somebody asked me, how are you going to fix this? I said, I don't know. How are you going to fix it? It's just an individual. I said, you ever spoken up when you think people have crossed the line on the way they're talking to a public official? Have you ever gone door to door for somebody who looks like they're really committed to civil discourse? Have you ever contributed to a campaign, volunteered? I knew what the answer was going to be. I said, so what are you doing? Because if you all think that this only changes with a handful of elected officials who operate this way, it's never going to change. It's going to get worse, particularly now that we have the challenge of social media amplification. So, but I think it is. But the way you do it, see, this whole talking circle, happy, can't we all be friends thing, it's antithetical to the two-party democratic system we have here. There's always going to be noise. The real way that you get to civil discourse is to find things you can agree on and make law, and then reflect on how that happened. So the bipartisan deals that I've been involved in were examples where we checked our ideologies to a large extent at the door and worked on something that we thought was somewhere in the center. And, you know, if you got a Democrat president in the White House and you're in a Republican minority, then it's probably going to be left of center. You got a Republican in the White House and you got a Republican majority, I wouldn't negotiate anything that wasn't right of center. And any Democrat that would be opposed to that needs to really look at what bipartisanship means when you're in the minority.
All right, another big thanks to Thom Tillis on his August recess for spending some time taking a walk and sitting down by the lake for a great conversation. We'll see you next week. If you want to keep up with what's happening in North Carolina politics and hear more conversations with people shaping our state and beyond, check out the Tying It Together YouTube channel in the description. Hit subscribe and let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, elections, and issues that matter to you.